I watched my son through the diner window, his arms moving fast under the bright kitchen lights as he scraped the flat-top grill clean after the dinner rush. 19 years old, first-year mechanical engineering student at Penn State, and he still pulled 4 shifts a week at this place on Route 9 to cover his own textbooks and car insurance. The November wind off the Delaware River cut right through my jacket as I stood there on the sidewalk waiting for him to clock out. His name was Jake, my kid, my whole world since his mother, Carol, passed from ovarian cancer when he was 6 years old. 13 years of the two of us figuring it out together in our 3-bedroom rental in Levittown, Pennsylvania. I worked residential construction management. Decent money most years, lean money others. Jake never once complained about the lean years, never once asked for things other kids had. When his friends got cars for their 16th birthdays, he asked if he could start washing dishes at the diner down the street. When his high school football coach said he had real potential and suggested a private training camp that cost $800, Jake said no thank you and started watching film on YouTube instead. He made varsity his junior year anyway. My phone buzzed. My brother Ryan's name lit up the screen. "Hey, you coming Thursday? Diane's been planning this for 6 weeks." "Of course. Jake and I will be there." "What time does it start?" There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. About that. Diane was thinking maybe this year it could be more of an adult gathering. Her parents are flying in from Scottsdale. Her father's business partner is coming with his wife. It's going to be a little more formal than usual. I felt something tighten in my chest. Jake's 19. He's not exactly a child, Ryan. I know that. I know. It's just, you know how Diane gets about impressions. Her father doesn't know us well yet, and she wants everything to go smoothly. What does that have to do with my son? Another pause. Longer this time. She just mentioned that if it came up what Jake does the diner thing, her father might make something of it. The man owns 4 manufacturing companies. Mike. He went to Dartmouth. Diane's worried it'll start a whole conversation she doesn't want to have at the dinner table. The words sat there between us like something rotten. He works at a diner because he's paying for his own education. He got a partial scholarship. He made up the rest himself. His GPA after 1 semester is a 3.8. I know all of that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're telling me my son is an embarrassment to your wife's family. Nobody said embarrassment. She just, "We'll be there at noon," I said, and hung up. I didn't tell Jake about the call that night. He came out of the diner smelling like onions and grill smoke, his Penn State hoodie stretched at the cuffs, and he was in a good mood because one of the regulars had tipped him $40 on a $22 check. He talked the whole drive home about a fluid dynamics problem his professor had put on the board that day, something about pressure differentials in pipe systems, and how he'd stayed after class to work through it. I nodded and listened, and thought about what my brother had said. By the time we got home, I had talked myself into believing it would be fine, that I was overreacting, that Diane was just high-strung and it wouldn't come to anything. I should have listened to what I felt in my chest when Ryan said her father might make something of it. Wednesday night, Jake laid out his clothes for the next day. Dark slacks he'd bought at a Goodwill 2 weeks earlier, a collared shirt he'd ironed twice because the first time left a crease in the wrong place. He'd even found a tie at the bottom of his closet from a cousin's graduation and spent 20 minutes watching a YouTube tutorial to make sure the knot was right. "You think Aunt Diane will like the wine I picked?" he asked, holding up a bottle of red he'd bought at the grocery store. He'd researched it online. $14, but apparently well-reviewed. "She'll love it," I said. He put the bottle on the counter next to the flowers he'd bought for the table. Sunflowers, because Diane had once mentioned they were her favorite. He'd remembered that from 2 years ago. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling for a long time. We drove to Ryan and Diane's place in Bucks County the next morning. They'd bought the house 3 years ago, 5,000 square feet, 4-car garage, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks like a golf course even in November. Diane's father had co-signed the mortgage and made sure everyone in the family knew it. We pulled up at 11:45, a little early. I'd planned it that way. Jake grabbed the wine and the sunflowers from the back seat and straightened his tie in the side mirror. "We're early," he said. "Good. Maybe we can help set up." We walked to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened. Diane stood in the doorway in a cream-colored dress with a pearl necklace I'd never seen before, her hair done like she was attending a fundraiser. She looked at Jake the way you look at a water stain on the ceiling, not with cruelty exactly, just with the flat acknowledgement that something was not where it was supposed to be. "You're early." Not a greeting, a notation. We thought we could help, I said. Everything's already handled. We hired a caterer. Her eyes moved to Jake, down to the thrift store slacks, back up to the grocery store wine. Jake, how sweet. She took the bottle without looking at it. Then she held the sunflowers out to one side, and without turning, passed them to someone behind her, the caterer. I realized like a woman handling something she didn't want to touch. The men are in the study. Jake, you can wait in the mudroom off the garage until the other guests arrive. Some of my father's colleagues have severe allergies. You work around food, and I don't want to take any chances. Jake stiffened beside me. I showered this morning, he said quietly. I haven't been to work since Tuesday. Diane smiled, the smile of someone who had decided the conversation was already over. I'm sure you did, but the smell really does cling to hair and clothing. You understand, it's just 30 minutes or so. There's a bench in the mudroom, and my father-in-law left some magazines out there. You'll be comfortable. She looked at me. Ryan's in the study. Second door past the kitchen. Jake touched my arm before I could say anything. It's fine, Dad. His voice was even, practiced. The voice of someone who had learned to absorb things without showing the bruise. I'll wait. Go find Uncle Ryan. He walked around the side of the house before I could stop him. I stood there in the doorway for a moment looking at Diane. I'll go find Ryan, I said. I should not have said that. I should have turned around, gotten Jake, and driven home. Every minute I stayed in that house after that moment is something I will spend a long time accounting for. I walked through their entryway with its vaulted ceiling and catered appetizers on marble countertops, and I went to find my brother. Ryan was in the study, on the phone. He held up one finger and kept talking. I waited and looked at the framed photos on the walls. Ryan and Diane at some gala in the city. Ryan and Diane on a boat in the Caribbean. Ryan and Diane's two kids, Tyler, 15, and Sophie, 12, at what looked like a ski lodge in Colorado. A family portrait in front of this house, everyone wearing coordinated white linen. No photos of Jake, no photos of Carol, no photos of our parents, who had both passed within 2 years of each other, our father from a stroke, and our mother 6 months later from what the doctors called complications, but what I always believed was grief. Ryan hung up. Mike, good, you're here. Diane put Jake in the mudroom. He had the decency to look at the floor for a moment. It's just until the other guests arrive. He's your nephew. He's 19 years old, and he ironed his shirt this morning and bought wine for your wife and sunflowers because he remembered she liked them. I know, and I appreciate that. But Diane's father, Frank, this man does not understand the concept of working your way through school. In his world, if you're working a service job, it means you failed somewhere. Diane doesn't want him getting the wrong idea about our family. Our family? Ryan shifted in his chair. You know what I mean. I do know what you mean. That's the problem. I looked at him. Where are Tyler and Sophie? Getting ready upstairs. Diane hired a photographer for a family portrait before dinner. She wants everything documented. A family portrait. By the tree in the living room, it's going to be beautiful. I stood up and walked out. Ryan called after me, but I kept moving. Through the living room, where Diane's parents and their colleagues were standing around with champagne flutes, laughing about something I didn't care about. Through the kitchen, where the catering staff was arranging a carved turkey and 3 kinds of pie and a green bean casserole that probably cost more to prepare than Jake made in a week of shifts. Out the side door and around to the garage. The mudroom was off the far side of the 4-car garage, a utility space with a washer and dryer and a wooden bench along one wall. Jake was sitting on that bench with a magazine on his lap he clearly wasn't reading. He was looking at his hands. When he heard me come in, he looked up and tried to arrange his face into something neutral. Hey, Dad. I sat down next to him. Talk to me. Nothing to talk about. I'm just waiting. Jake. He looked away. Sophie came out about 10 minutes ago to get something from the car. She saw me sitting here and she asked why I wasn't inside. I told her Aunt Diane said I should wait out here because of allergies. He paused. She said, "Oh, is it because you work at that diner?" Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then she went back inside. He turned the magazine over in his hands. 12 years old. She already knows what Aunt Diane thinks of me. Something cold moved through me. How long has this been going on? He shrugged with one shoulder. Since before they bought this house. You remember Cousin Tyler's birthday 2 summers ago? The party at the country club? He looked at me carefully, gauging whether to continue. Aunt Diane introduced me to someone as Ryan's brother's son. Not her nephew, not by name, just Ryan's brother's son, like she wasn't sure I merited a specific identity. He stopped. Last Thanksgiving here, she ran out of chairs at the main table, and she put me and two of the catering staff at a folding table in the corner. She thought I wouldn't notice that the catering staff were eating off paper plates, and she'd given me a paper plate too. Everyone else had china. Each sentence landed like something heavy being set down on a floor that wasn't built to hold it. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at me with an expression that broke something open in me. Patient, tired, far older than 19. Because Uncle Ryan is the only family you have left besides me. I didn't want to be the reason you lost that. I pulled him into a hug. He was taller than me now by 2 inches, broader in the shoulders. But sitting on that bench in a mudroom off someone's 4-car garage, waiting to be allowed into Thanksgiving dinner, he was 6 years old again, at his mother's graveside, holding my hand, asking when we were going home. You listen to me, I said. You are working harder than any person inside that house has ever had to work. You are doing it without complaint and without asking anyone for anything, and you are doing it while carrying a 3.8 at one of the top engineering programs in this state. Your mother would have been so proud of you she wouldn't have been able to stand it. I am so proud of you I don't have the words for it. He was quiet for a moment. Thanks, Dad. Finished sitting here for exactly 2 more minutes. Then we're going inside. He looked at me. Dad, we're going inside, and we're sitting at that table, and we're holding our heads up. Because there is nothing to be ashamed of. Not one single thing. We waited while the other guests arrived. I watched through the mudroom window as 2 more cars pulled into the circular drive, a Lexus and a Range Rover. Diane met them at the door in full performance mode, laughing, touching arms, directing the caterers with small gestures. The kind of woman who had organized her entire life around the management of other people's impressions. After about 20 minutes, she appeared at the mudroom door. Everyone's here. You can come in. She looked at Jake briefly. Just please stay close to your father and try not to bring up the diner unless someone asks. I didn't respond. I just followed her inside with Jake behind me. The living room was full. 30 people at least. All dressed like they were there to be photographed, which several of them were a photographer, was setting up a ring light near the Christmas tree. Diane had apparently put up a full month early for the occasion. I scanned the room. Everything expensive. Nothing warm. People noticed us when we walked in. There were looks, the kind of looks that pass between people who have already talked about you. Ryan appeared at my elbow. Good. Come meet Frank and Joanna. He steered me toward an older couple near the fireplace. Frank was probably 70, silver-haired, the kind of man who shook your hand and assessed your net worth at the same time. His wife Joanna wore the kind of jewelry that doesn't need to be large to announce itself. Frank, Joanna, this is my brother Mike. He's in construction management. Frank's handshake was firm and brief. Good trade, he said, in the tone of a man complimenting someone else's practical used car. Steady demand. He moved on immediately to ask Ryan something about a tax bill in the state Senate. I looked back for Jake. He'd been redirected by Diane to a chair near the window, away from the main cluster of guests, near enough to the catering station that twice in the first 10 minutes someone asked him to pass something. Both times, he did it politely, without any visible reaction. But I saw his jaw tighten the second time. Diane's photographer gathered the family for portraits. Diane and Frank, and Joanna in the center, Ryan flanking his in-laws, Tyler and Sophie on either end. Beautiful and arranged, and completely deliberate. Extended family? The photographer offered, gesturing vaguely toward the room. This is perfect, thank you, Diane said, without looking at Jake. Dinner was called. The dining room table sat 32. Place cards everywhere. I found mine toward the middle left. I looked for Jake's. Found it at the far end, last seat, with a partial view blocked by a china cabinet, next to where the caterers would be moving in and out with serving dishes. I picked up both cards and moved us to 2 open seats in the center of the table. Diane appeared behind me within 30 seconds. Those seats are for Frank's business partner and his wife. Put them at the end, then. The seating arrangement was not casual, Mike. Neither was putting my son in a mudroom. She held my gaze for a moment, then she took the cards from my hand and walked away without another word. The meal started. Course after course of food that probably tasted exactly the same as food that cost 1/5 as much. Conversations around me about second homes and private school waiting lists and whether Scottsdale or Sedona had better weather in February. I kept half an ear on it all and kept the other half on Jake. He was eating quietly, staying in his lane. Until Frank's business partner, a man named Dennis, with a pocket square and an opinion about everything, leaned across the table and said to no one in particular, "So, who's the young man?" "Haven't been introduced." "That's Mike's son," Ryan said. "Jake. First year at Penn State. Engineering program. Good school," Dennis said. He turned to Jake. "What do you do for work while you're in school? Or do you not have to?" Jake answered evenly. "I work at a diner in Levittown. Line cook, mostly." Dennis nodded slowly, the way people nod when they want you to see them deciding what they think. "A diner." He smiled at his wife. "Well, I suppose that builds character." A few people laughed softly, the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. Tyler, Ryan's son, looked at Jake from across the table with a smirk he probably learned from his mother. "Does it pay well, the diner thing?" "Enough to cover what I need," Jake said. "Which is what, exactly?" "Books. Car insurance. Incidentals." Jake kept his voice level. "I want to finish school without owing anyone anything." "That's very wholesome," Diane said from 3 seats down, and the way she said it made wholesome sound like naive. And that was the moment. That single word in that single tone, with that slight pause before it and the microscopic smile after it, delivered in front of 30 people to a 19-year-old boy who had ironed his shirt that morning and bought sunflowers because he remembered what she liked. I set down my fork. The sound was small, but something about it changed the air in the room. "Wholesome," I said. "That's a word for it." Diane looked at me. "Mike, Tyler's 15, I said. "He drives the car you bought him to the private school you pay $60,000 a year for, where he pulled a C average last year and had to be tutored through biology. Sophie just turned 12, and she already knows that her cousin, who works to pay for his own education, is someone to be condescended to. That's what you've built here." I looked at Dennis. "My son works 30 hours a week on top of a full engineering course load and maintains a 3.8 gigapascals. He bought the wine he brought tonight with money he earned on his feet at a flat-top grill. He bought sunflowers for my sister-in-law because he remembered 2 years ago she mentioned they were her favorite. He would not take a single dollar from me for this dinner because he didn't want to owe it. He is going to spend the rest of his life being the kind of man who does not need anyone to manage the impressions of the people around him. He'll earn every room he walks into." I stood up. "And he is not going to sit at the end of this table next to a china cabinet while you decide whether he's worth acknowledging." The dining room was completely silent. 30 people, and the only sound was the low music Diane had put on to make the room feel elegant. Ryan said my name, quietly, once. Diane's face had gone from pink to white to something that wasn't quite either. "You need to leave," she said. We were on our way. I looked at my brother. The way I looked at him was a question, and he knew it. Right now, this moment, which way are you going to go? Ryan looked at Diane, then at me, then at Jake, who was standing up slowly from his chair with his napkin folded neatly on the table. The way he'd been raised. "Mike," Ryan said, and there was something in his voice that wasn't quite an apology and wasn't quite a defense. "Let's not do this here." "You're right. Let's not." Jake and I walked out. We went through the living room past the Christmas tree that had gone up a month early for a photographer, past the champagne tower Diane had assembled near the entryway, 7 tiers of crystal, her project for the week, something she'd mentioned to Ryan 3 separate times on the phone. I stopped. I looked at it. I heard Diane's heels on the hardwood behind us. "Don't you dare," she said. I reached down and pulled a glass from the 2nd tier. Slow, deliberate. The tower came down like a slow-motion collapse, crystal cascading across the hardwood, champagne spreading across the entryway rug in a wide golden stain. The sound was spectacular. "My son works a grill so he doesn't have to ask anyone for anything," I said into the silence. "You could learn something from that." We walked out into the November air and got into my truck. Neither of us said anything for the first few miles. Then Jake let out a breath that sounded like something he'd been holding for a long time. That was, he stopped, started again. "You didn't have to do that." "I did." The champagne tower was a little much. "Probably." He looked out the window. She had those glasses rented. It was going to cost her either way. We drove in silence for a while. "Dad," his voice was different. quiet and real in a way it hadn't been in the house. I've been doing the thing where I tell myself it doesn't matter, that I know who I am and what I'm working toward and their opinion doesn't mean anything. He paused. But it does matter. They're family. Or they're supposed to be. And every time I walk into that house, I feel like I'm apologizing for existing. You'll never walk into that house again unless you want to. What about you and Uncle Ryan? I thought about my brother at that dinner table. The calculation I had watched happen behind his eyes. The moment he chose to stay seated, I don't know yet, I said honestly. We drove home to Levittown and ordered Chinese food and watched the game and went to bed. It felt like the most normal and the most important Thanksgiving we'd ever had. Ryan didn't call that night. Didn't call the next day either. A week later, I got a text, not from Ryan, but from Diane's lawyer. A detailed invoice for one rented champagne tower, one professional-grade area rug requiring restoration, and the cost of a caterer who had to stay 2 extra hours to clean up. The total came to $3,100. The message included payment terms and a note about small claims court. I responded through my own attorney. I laid out 13 years of documented incidents, the paper plates at Tyler's birthday party, the family portrait Diane had excluded Jake from, the text messages where Diane referred to Jake, in writing, as Ryan's charity case nephew. I noted that I would be happy to pursue this publicly and completely, and in whatever venue Diane preferred. I mentioned that Frank's colleagues would likely find the story interesting. I never received another communication about the $3,100. What I did receive, 4 months later, on a cold March afternoon, was Ryan's car in my driveway. I was in the garage going through Jake's old football equipment, cleaning it out to donate when I heard tires on gravel. I didn't go out. I kept working. After a moment I heard footsteps and Ryan appeared in the garage doorway, hands in his jacket pockets, looking like a man who hadn't slept well in a long time. I didn't call first, he said. I didn't know if you'd pick up. Probably wouldn't have, I said. He stood there for a moment. Diane and I are separating. I set down what I was holding. I found out in January she'd been hiding financial decisions from me for 2 years, moving assets around without telling me. Her father helped her set up accounts I didn't know existed. There are lawyers involved now, he exhaled. When I found out, she said she did it because she never trusted that I wouldn't side with you over her. After everything she did to maintain her father's approval, this house, these dinners, putting our kids through schools they didn't need to be in after all of it, what she was most afraid of was that I'd eventually choose my brother over her image. He looked at me. She wasn't wrong to be afraid of that. I just waited too long to actually do it. I wiped my hands on a rag. Jake's the one you need to say that to. I know. Not me. I know. Is he? He's at work. He's doing a paid internship with a civil engineering firm in Philly this semester. Monday through Wednesday. Then Thursday and Friday he's back at the diner because he doesn't want to give up the shifts until the internship converts to something permanent. I looked at my brother. He's 19 and he's got a plan and he's executing it and he's happy. Don't go over there and make it about you. Ryan nodded slowly. Can I have the address? I wrote it on a scrap of paper and handed it to him. He started to say something else. Don't thank me, I said. Go talk to Jake. Earn it. He left. I went back to sorting equipment. Jake told me about the conversation later that week. Ryan had shown up at the end of his shift, waited outside in the cold, and when Jake came out, Ryan said all of it, every specific thing, every moment he should have stood up and didn't. The mudroom, the place card at the end of the table, sitting down when he should have stood up. He said it plainly and without excuses. Jake listened to all of it. Then he asked Ryan one question. What's different now? Ryan said, I'm not scared of her anymore. Jake told him he could prove it over time, and that was the only way he'd know whether to believe him. Then they shook hands and went their separate ways, which is how it started. Ryan showed up to Jake's engineering department's end-of-year presentation in May. Sat in the third row, clapped harder than anyone in the room. Afterward, he took us both to dinner at a place Jake picked, a corner Italian restaurant that cost $40 total for all 3 of us, and Ryan didn't make a single comment about it. He came to Jake's 21st birthday in June, brought a card with a check inside that Jake used to pay off the last of his fall semester textbook bill. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that needed to announce itself. Over the summer, I watched Ryan become a version of himself I remembered from before the marriage, before the mortgage, and the galas, and the careful management of Frank's opinion. He moved into a rental 2 towns over, smaller than anything he'd lived in for 15 years, and said it felt like he could breathe again. Tyler and Sophie were taking the divorce hard in different ways. Tyler was angry and directing it at Ryan. Sophie was quieter, more watchful. Ryan kept showing up for both of them every soccer game, every school event, every weekend he was supposed to have them and several he wasn't, because showing up was the only thing he knew how to do differently. One evening in August, the three of us were sitting on my back porch after dinner when Jake said, "Uncle Ryan, Tyler's still not talking to you?" "Not much. We're getting there. You should invite him to the shop." Jake had started volunteering on weekends at a community auto repair program in Trenton, teaching basic maintenance to kids who couldn't afford real mechanics. He wanted to learn how to change his own oil last year, and Diane told him that was what service stations were for. He might actually like it. Ryan looked at Jake for a moment. That's a good idea. Just don't make it a big thing. Just ask him if he wants to come." Tyler came 2 weekends later. Spent 4 hours under the hood of a 2009 Civic and drove home with grease on his arms and a look on his face that his mother probably wouldn't have recognized. He came back the following week and the week after that. I think about that Thanksgiving sometimes. About the champagne tower coming down. About Jake's face in the mudroom when I walked in and found him sitting on that bench holding a magazine he wasn't reading. About the 13 years he absorbed small humiliations in that house because he didn't want to be the reason I lost my only brother. He is 22 now. The internship converted. He works full-time at the engineering firm in Philadelphia. Still takes 2 night courses a semester to finish his degree on his own timeline. Still splits a modest apartment with 2 roommates in South Philly because he says he doesn't want to spend money he hasn't earned yet. He still works 1 shift a week at the diner on Sunday mornings. Not because he has to, because Donna, the owner, covered for him 3 times during final exams, and he doesn't forget things like that. When I ask him how it's going, he says fine and means it. When I ask him what he's thinking about, he talks about pressure loads and material tolerances and a problem he's been working through on a bridge rehabilitation project. He talks about his coworkers by name, knows who's going through a hard time and who just had good news. Asks about their kids. He treats the woman who runs the front desk at his firm with the same consideration he treats the senior partners because that's who he is. That's who his mother taught him to be in 6 short years and who he has chosen to keep being ever since. There is a photo on my refrigerator from this past Thanksgiving. Ryan's rental. 6 people around a folding table covered in mismatched dishes. Ryan and me, Jake, Tyler, Sophie, and Tyler's girlfriend who came with a sweet potato casserole that was the best thing any of us had ever eaten. Nothing catered, nothing coordinated. Sophie brought the sunflowers and put them in a water glass in the center of the table because there was no vase. It looked, objectively, like nothing. It was everything. The only thing I would have done differently is this. When Diane opened that door and told my son to wait in the mudroom, I would have taken his arm right then. I would have said, "No, we're not doing that." I would have put the wine and the sunflowers back in the truck and driven home and spent Thanksgiving at our own table, the 2 of us, the way we'd done it plenty of years before and would have done it every year for the rest of our lives without a moment's regret. Because there is no dinner worth attending at the cost of your child's dignity. No relationship worth preserving at the price of standing by and watching someone you love be made to feel small. If there is one thing I want anyone to take from this, it is that your children are watching you make decisions. They are absorbing what you do and what you fail to do, and they are constructing from it a picture of what they are worth. I got it right eventually. But eventually is a luxury, and not everyone gets it. Stand up for them, every time, from the beginning. That is the whole job.